But we will begin. I have no announcements. We will begin with Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Volume 2, Chapter 4, Text 178. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sa para parayo shaktyo para shaktir nagadyate prabho svabhavaki sahi kyata prakritya ityapi. Translation. Of the two divisions of the Lord's energy, the superior and the inferior, she is known as the superior energy. She acts on her own and is also called Prakriti, nature. Commentary. Authorities like Prahlad Maharaj have glorified this principal energy of the Supreme as his Parashakti. In the Vishnu Purana, 119.76, 176, 177, Shri Prahlad contrasts her with the Apara Shakti, the inferior energy of the Supreme. Sarva Bhuteshu Sarvatman Ya Shaktir Aparatava Gunashraya Namastasyai Shashvataya Sureshwara Yatita Gochara Vacham Manasam Chavisheshana Gyani Gyana Parichedya Vande Tam Ishwarim Param. O soul of all beings, O Lord of the demigods, I offer my obeisances to that eternal but inferior energy of yours, who is the shelter of the material modes found in all created beings. She is devoid of variety and beyond comprehension by words and the mind. She delimits the knower and his knowledge. I offer my homage to her, the Supreme Controller in this world. The Supreme Lord's inferior energy called Maya, who manifests inert matter, is beyond the range of words and the mind because she is devoid of material distinctions, categories, qualities, and so on. This is so because she is in essence an aspect of the Absolute Truth. Nonetheless, being the illuminator of all things, she manifests the difference between the jiva, who is the knower, and his knowledge. She does this the same way she illuminates the distinctions between external objects like clay pots. Another way of understanding this concept is that the Lord's inferior energy delimits the jnana of the jnanis, the understanding of persons exclusively dedicated to theoretical knowledge. These speculative philosophers cannot surmise truth about her conjecture because she limits the power of their knowledge. Indeed, only those persons who have pure devotion for the Supreme Lord have the mental strength to understand her. She is called Ishwari because she belongs to the essential being of the Lord. She is identical with him in eternality and other transcendental qualities. Alternatively, the current verse spoken by Narada does not refer to the Lord's inferior energy, even though it includes the word Prakriti. Rather, Narada is saying that the Lord's superior energy, who is completely capable of arranging all the varieties that emanate from the Lord, is called Para because she belongs to the pleasure potencies of the spiritual realm. She is also called Shakti and Prakriti by the speakers of the Puranas. The word Prakriti means intrinsic nature, indicating that she is the natural, autonomous potency of the personality of Godhead. She is said to be non-different from him because her substance is the same as his. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unminitam Dhyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Nangayate Garim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurundina Taranam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shanyavari Pastachadeshatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I would like to start today's class by going back a few verses. Sometimes it helps me also to put everything into context. And especially the way that we're covering these verses in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, we're trying to always keep everything in context as much as possible, although sometimes I realize I drift. But we're speaking a lot about the Lord's energy. You'll have to forgive me, my voice is, it's going again. I'm not sure what it is, but it doesn't seem to be, seems to fluctuate. Sometimes it's pretty good, sometimes it's not so good. Today is a not so good day. I'll try to go as long as I can. So we've been talking about the different potencies of the Lord. First, we spoke about the Lord himself and his various manifestations. Then we went into the verse about how the Lord invests his potencies in certain jivas, and how those Sakyavyash avatars manifested his various potencies in varying degrees, and also in terms of his particular potencies, such as the potency of knowledge, which we gave as an example of the four Kumaras, potency of devotion, which was in Narada Muni. So then, of course, Narada Muni is explaining all of these important points to Gopakumara. And now he's moved into the potencies themselves, of which we've been discussing a lot, that the original mother of all potencies is none other than Srimati Radharani, who, as we had just previously described, as Purna Shakti, and Krishna is Purna Shaktiman, meaning that he is the energetic source, and Srimati Radharani is the energy, and all other potencies are manifestations coming from her. And then, last verse, we spoke about the inconceivable, a lot about the inconceivable nature of the Lord and his potencies, where that how they were inconceivably simultaneously one and different. And we explained, although we oftentimes use that achintya bheda bheda tattva, we use that expression to explain that which was taught by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then we did cover quite extensively the inconceivable nature of being simultaneously one and different. Sometimes we just accept it as it is what it is, and we oftentimes, when speaking to various audiences, we explain that this is our philosophy, how the potencies of the Lord are simultaneously one with the Lord and different with the Lord. But we went into detail in our last class of how just inconceivable that is, to be one and at the same time to be many. And and we analyzed it not only in terms of the simultaneous one and difference, but we analyzed it in terms of many apparent contradictions that exist in Krishna, which can only be reconciled if one gets the mercy of the Lord or gets the mercy of the Lord's internal potency. And we spoke quite a lot about that last time, and we gave the reference from Bhaktivinoda Thakur from his Dasamula Tattva, explaining how logic is inadequate. It's not possible in any way to approach an understanding of the Lord and his potencies with logic. And if we try, we'll always fail. And it's not possible. He cannot be understood in that way. And as Prabhupada many times explains, that Krishna reserves the right to reveal himself, and he always has the upper hand. And that is, as he clearly states in Bhagavad Gita, that you can only understand me as I am by undivided devotional service. Only then can you break down the barriers of these mysteries about me and be able to understand how I exist eternally along with my potencies. And never was there a time, then when I began, never was a time, was there a beginning of my potencies. And that we discussed also, how both the potencies and the Lord himself exist simultaneously, eternally, without any beginning, which is inconceivable also. Because from our frame of reference and by utilization of logic on our part, and as I gave the example, if any of you will please take just a few moments and think about it, try to think of something that has no beginning. And you can only go so far. At some point, you have to accept, I can't really understand this. I can't. I mean, Prabhupada, of course, says, we have a father, our father has a father, his father has a father, and we go back so many generations, and they had a father, but finally when we go to the original source, then we come to Krishna. And of course, whenever we try to explain this to logicians or to those who are unaccustomed to devotional principles, the first question they ask, well, who created Krishna? And of course, as we know, at that particular point, if they're going to argue, it's time for prasadam. And if they're a little submissive, we may be able to try that Krishna has no beginning. And he is the original cause of all causes, as spoken by Lord Brahma in Brahma Samhita. He's Sarvakarana Karanam. He has no cause. And he's Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadam, Anantarupam. He's non-dual. There's no duality in him. He's one. And his body is not subject to decay. And he is the origin of everything, yet he is always manifesting an eternal youthful form. And try to understand. The only way you can understand and is by, and Prabhupada was talking about this yesterday, the descending process. The process of inductive knowledge. Very, very, yesterday's class. We're still on Ajamil, but Prabhupada was speaking about inductive knowledge and deductive knowledge. And he, in his usual Srila Prabhupada, very convincing way, he made it clear that if you want to waste your time, try going the deductive approach. And if you want to know, and of course his point is, you have to take it from Krishna. That was it. That was Prabhupada's bottom line in yesterday's class. If you don't take it from Krishna, you won't know. And then, of course, he began explaining the relevance of Shastra and disciplic succession. So, yes, we discussed this last class that that which is inconceivable can only be understood by the mercy of the Lord. And as we discussed, that mercy is his internal potency, Yoga Maya. And that Yoga Maya potency, of course, is a manifestation of Srimati Radharani, who is the mother of all potencies. And she has many, many different manifestations, both amongst his Parashakti, which is what is being talking about today. The Parashakti is his internal potencies, and of course Aparashakti, which is his external potencies. We think of the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states, Aparayamitastvanyam Bhaktimidi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho yaidam dairite jagat. He specifically says aparayam itastvanyam. He says besides this superior energy, or besides this inferior energy, which he quoted in the previous verse, Bhumir aponolovayo kamano buddha evacha. He describes his separated material energies. He says besides this prakriti, inferior energy, is the spiritual energy, which are the living entities. And of course, Prabhupada would many times quote the verse, Vishnu Shakti para proktam kshetrigyakya ataparam avijikarma samgyanam tritiya shaktir ishite, which is that Krishna's potencies can be summarized in three categories. They are the internal potency, which is full of knowledge. And there's the living entities, who are the marginal potencies. And of course, then there's who can be covered by his third potencies, which is Maya, or the illusory energy. And how is it noticed? How is it seen? It's visible in fruitive activities. So these are three primary potencies of the Lord. And that's what today's verse is. Today's verse is a description of the two divisions of the Lord's energy. There's no discussion about the of the living entities, but the two divisions are the Parashakti and the Aparashakti. And so that's a little summary of the verses that we've been reading from. And I wanted to speak about one topic today, which is immediately relevant to the verse that we're reading today. Am I speaking too fast for the translator? I just realized I forgot this is being translated. I guess there's no way of knowing. I won't know. I'll try to speak slower. Is the point about the apara energy, or the inferior energy. This Sanatana Goswami quotes that Prahlad Maharaj glorifies the principal energy of the Lord, which is the Parashakti, in the Vishnu Purana by contrasting her with the Aparashakti, the inferior energy of the Supreme. And one of the points that are described about the inferior energy is that she delimits the knower and his knowledge. I offer my homage to her, the Supreme Controller in this world. Delimits the knower, and knowledge means that she's the one who delimits, sets the limit. She sets the limits as to how much the living entities can know. She sets the limits, and because, of course, as Parashakti, she's Yogamaya, she also manifests full knowledge of what the devotees who are surrendered to her can know about Krishna. Now, as we have explained many times before, and I won't go into explaining it again so much in detail, we do know that full knowledge of Krishna for the devotees engaged in loving spontaneous devotional service, full knowledge of Krishna means no knowledge of Krishna. Their knowledge is jnana sunya bhakti. All they know is Krishna and not that he's God. They don't need to know the other part. So all they know is Krishna. So no knowledge about his potencies, no knowledge about his everything else that we've been covering quite extensively in understanding the Lord of Vaikuntha, Narayan, and his unlimited potencies. And we've already discussed that in great detail, how the devotees engaged in spontaneous loving devotional service to the Lord, all they know is their relationship with Krishna. They have these feelings of mamata, that Krishna is my friend, or my son, or my lover. And Krishna is everything. And if the devotees ever express anything about Krishna in any other way, in their words or prayers, especially those devotees who are the internal confidential associates of the Lord in Goloka, if they express it it's only because it's a momentary occurrence that manifests but doesn't stick at all. And many times it's because they're just simply repeating something they heard, but they don't really stick with that conviction whatsoever. All they know is their love is jnana sunya bhakti, which means they are completely under the protection of the Lord's internal potency, yoga maya. And who is a manifestation of Srimati Radharani. So, but for those who are not under the protection of the Daivi Prakriti, the internal potency of the Lord, Mahatmanastumam Partha, Daivim Prakritim Ashta. As Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, the Mahatmas who are under the protection of the Daivi Prakriti, the internal potency of the Lord. For those who are not under that protection, then the external potency, Apara Shakti, delimits the knower and his knowledge. She sets the limits of how much can be known by this jiva soul. Of course, she covers, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am never manifest to those who are foolish and unintelligent. For them, I am covered by my eternal creative potency, Yoga Maya, so the whole world knows me not, who am unborn and infallible. As we know, Yoga Maya, in that particular case, is Krishna's original internal potency, and they are covered by her external manifestation of Mahamaya. So there's a nice, very, very nice, very nice pastime in this connection. And I don't even know if we'll be able to fully cover it, because there are many verses, some of which I would like to read. But it is a very, very perfect pastime which shows how this potency of the Lord delimits the knowledge of those who are not fully devoted. And the pastime is the pastime of the Kesava Kashmiri in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. And many of us, I'm sure, are aware of that particular pastime, how Kesava Kashmiri, he was a worshipper of Saraswati. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his commentaries, Vrindavan Das Thakur also states it in the verses of Chaitanya Bhagavat, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur expands and elaborates on it by explaining that Saraswati and Mahalakshmi, they have the same potencies. And I'll read the verses because the verses themselves are really very telling, especially the commentary, which helps us to understand that there is Saraswati who's inclined to, just as Mahalakshmi is inclined to give devotion to those who are submissive to the internal potency of the Lord. And there's Dushta Saraswati, which is what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and what does she do? She gives knowledge, but she delimits. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur didn't use that word, but she delimits how much, she sets the limits as to how much they can actually know. And that's exactly, of course, what happened to Kesava Kashmiri as the pastime reveals that he was a Digvijay, and he was well known as a worshipper of Saraswati, and he was chanting mantras and worshipping Saraswati. And because of his worship, he was favored by Saraswati, and so much so that he could not be defeated. And the point that I was making is that how the Digvijay had sufficient knowledge by the blessings of Saraswati that nobody could defeat him. Nobody could defeat him. And he was quite, as we know, proud, which of course is going to be one of his delimiting characteristics, is that pride. He was quite proud of the knowledge. He was quite proud of his ability for having defeated everybody in the country. And is described that he was known to have traveled throughout the whole country, and wherever he would go, he would engage in argument with great scholars, and when they were defeated, he would say, okay, give me a certificate of defeat. And instead of accumulating devotional credits, he was more interested in accumulating certificates of defeat. And not only that, but he understood that Navadvip at that time was a great center of learning. And Navadvip was the place where these many scholars had gathered, and they studied extensively logic and argument. And as we know in Lord Chaitanya's early Leelas, pastimes in Navadvip, he was known as Nimai Pandit, and he was known for being able to defeat. But he had one particular quality also, which at that time he was manifesting, which was for a purpose, because he wanted to attract a lot of students, because he had a plan. But his purpose was first attract a lot of students, as many students as possible. And why did he want to get all those students? Because at some point he wanted to just say, okay, forget everything, and let's get into the real substance of a purpose of my appearance. So what did he do? As a pundit, he was so flaming arrogant. and he used to display his arrogance with everybody, and of course that was his Leela, that was his pastime, and that was one of the attributes which he was displaying, which the devotees who had descended before him and did not yet recognize him because they were covered by his internal potency. And although Advaita Acharya had called for him to appear, and although the Lord had sent all of his different associates to appear before him and to all assemble in Navadvip and to prepare for his arrival, they didn't recognize him, but they were attracted to him, and they were so very attracted to him because he had such characteristics of beauty, of knowledge, and everything, manifesting so many wonderful qualities, that they would oftentimes pray that if we would only become a devotee, we'd surrender to him. everything. And that was oftentimes their prayer. And one of the features which the Lord displayed, which caused them to be concerned about him, was his arrogance. And why was he arrogant? Because all the students, they were also very proud and arrogant, and many of them would get into arguments because what was the basis of their arrogance? They would always say, my teacher is better than your teacher. And they get into arguments on this basis. They would go down to the Ganges and they would play with one another, and then when they would sit and then when they would talk and discuss amongst themselves and get into argument, and then they would say, hey, look, my teacher's much better than your teacher, forget it. You won't be able to. And they were very proud in this way. And therefore, Lord Chaitanya, he wanted to become a teacher, which everybody would say, now he's, just see how good he is. And not only that, they would start arguing out of pride. Yeah, our teacher is, and not only that, but Lord Chaitanya would manifest this arrogance, and he would show in many different ways of how no one could defeat him. And they liked that. But of course, at some point, in this particular instance, with the Digvijay, Kesava Kashmiri, he was very proud, very arrogant, and the Lord was assembled with all of his various students, and he was thinking of the Digvijay that he is so proud that if I defeat him in a big assembly, he'll probably die. He won't live. So he was thinking, better I defeat him in a way, in a private assembly, and so that he can live, and not only he can live, but so he can become a devotee. But the Lord had still not revealed yet to his devotees who he was. It's still not yet revealed at this particular time. But the Lord wanted to make Kesava Kashmiri a devotee. So we'll explain this a little bit more. But what happened was the Digvijay came to Navadvip. He had heard something about Nimai Pandit. And he entered Navadvip with his huge entourage, because wherever he would go, there would be horses and infantrymen and ministers, and he was really Digvijay. I mean, in fact, Prabhupada was speaking today, just today, he was speaking about how the king, he says, whenever the king comes, he never comes alone. He says he always comes accompanied by all of his entourage. And he was explaining how that when Krishna comes, he brings his entourage. So the Digvijay, he also had this huge entourage, and he entered Navadvip with this entourage. And then he wanted to find out because he heard something about this Nimai Pandit. And he was thinking that if I defeat this Nimai Pandit, boy, this will be a real feather in my cap. This I can add my certificate of defeat to my long list of certificates of defeat. So many of the students, they told Nimai Pandit about the presence of Digvijay. And when word went out, then even some of the Bhattacharyas in Navadvip, some of the Bhattacharyas, when they heard that the Digvijay Kesava Kashmiri was now in Navadvip, they became very afraid. They're thinking, is he going to come after us? And they began hiding and in so many different ways. They were very concerned because a lot of the Bhattacharyas also had a similar mindset. If they were defeated, then what would happen to them? What would happen to their reputation? So they decided, let's make ourselves unseen. But Nimai, when his students told him about how Kesava Kashmiri had come to Navadvip, he sat with all of his students on the bank of the Ganges, and they were having a discussion. And I can't remember what they were speaking about, but Nimai had not yet fully disclosed at that time. He had still not disclosed who he was. He was teaching his students. And then Kesava Kashmiri came with his entourage, and he saw this very beautiful person sitting there. And somehow, when he saw him, he was struck with fear. And he didn't know why. Fear never manifested in his heart. He was fully proud. But at this particular point, he felt some fear. So I wanted to read, before we get into what happens during this attempt for the Digvijay to display the wealth of his knowledge, and for Goddess Saraswati to reveal how she had complete control, and she was speaking through him. When he would speak, she was speaking through him on his tongue. Of course, we know at some point she backed off, and she said, "Sorry, I can't." This is where the delimiting factor comes in. when she backs away, and all of a sudden, Kesava Kashmiri, becomes totally bewildered. But I'm jumping a little bit ahead. I don't want to go there just yet. Let's speak about Saraswati and what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says about Saraswati, because this is directly related to our discussion about Mahalakshmi, Srimati Radharani, and these various potencies. So this is Chaitanya Bhagavat. I'm reading, and I hope I can find it. I'm sure I can find it. I'll find it. I found it. So it just says that Kesava Kashmiri was a staunch devotee of Goddess Saraswati. By chanting her mantra, he had won her favor. Text 21. Saraswati is the personification of devotional service to Lord Vishnu. Being non-different from Lakshmi, she eternally resides on the chest of Lord Vishnu. She is the mother of the universe. That's Vrindavan Das Thakur. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says in his commentary, Rama refers to Sri Shakti, or Lakshmi, who resides on the chest of Vishnu. Saraswati is the personification of devotional service, or Bhu Shakti. She is the consort of the holy name of the Lord. Very nice reference. I'll read it later too about the holy name. The phrase Jaganmata refers to Vishnu's Nila, Leela, and Durga Shaktis. Although the features of Rama, Saraswati, and Durga are different, they are all actually non-different from Shri Narayani. Different? Non-different? Sound familiar? Although they're different, they are all actually non-different from Shri Narayani or Lakshmi, the internal potency of Shri Narayan. They are all personifications of Lord Vishnu's service, since they are all principal Ashraya Vigrahas. They are the mothers of the universe. Text 22. Due to the Brahman's great fortune, she appeared before him and blessed him to conquer the three worlds. It's a blessing. Conquer the three worlds. May sound like it's a nice blessing, but how is he conquering the three worlds? Certificates of defeat. That's how he's conquering. With Lord Chaitanya is going to reveal to him later. You want to conquer? You better switch to something more superior than your certificates of defeat. He's going to tell him that later. The best way to conquer is devotional service. But that's later. So what happened? I lost my place. Okay. Due to the Brahman's great fortune, she appeared before him and blessed him to conquer the three worlds. Commentary. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Spiritual knowledge, or Saraswati, hides her real identity from those who are proud, foolish, attached to material enjoyment, and absorbed in the false ego of thinking themselves the doers, and in her shadow form of Dushta Saraswati, she deceives them by awarding them benedictions. Those such puffed up people who receive her benedictions are able to conquer the three worlds. They are eligible for being totally defeated by the Supreme Lord. I love that. Of course, there's that wonderful verse where, was it Shreya Shritim Bhakti Mudashite Vibho? Is that the verse? I can't remember. Where Lord Brahma in his prayer says that Krishna cannot be conquered by anyone within the three worlds except for the devotees who are conquered by hearing his glories. That's not Shri Ashratim, it's another verse. But my Sanskrit. Fortunately, also I've been hearing Prabhupada. I won't say it. I hear in the last few verses, Prabhupada also, he is asking devotees to help him, remind him what certain verses were. And when I heard that, I just, I was thinking, of course, I'm nowhere, incomparable, nothing. But at least Prabhupada may occasionally forget. But I forget all the time. Anyways, so Though such puffed up people who receive her benedictions are able to conquer the three worlds, they are eligible for being totally defeated by the Supreme Lord, who is the ultimate giver of benedictions. Saraswati Devi never desires that her worshipable Lord may be defeated. So she deceives the conditioned souls who are bewildered by Maya from chanting the glories of the Lord's holy names. When Shuddha Saraswati Devi sees that her worshipper is not inclined towards the service of the Supreme Lord, she bewilders him with material knowledge, which is her shadow form. Shadow. We always hear that Durga is the shadow, right? The shadow is, the shadow moves with the object, but it is a shadow. It is not the full, cannot fully see the object by seeing the shadow. All you can see is the shadow. And so there's one other thing before I wanted to read also about this shadow potency. In relationship to the holy name. This is Bhaktivinoda Thakur from the 7th chapter of Harinam Chintamani. And he says, the Lord's energy of illusion, Maya Devi, Durga, Kali, is speaking specifically about those who are offenders, commit offenses by blaspheming the Vedic literatures. The Lord's energy of illusion, Maya Devi, casts these offenders of scripture further into the material world. Manifesting one form of mercy, she gives them worldly happiness or punishment according to their activities, but never gives them an attraction for the nectar of the holy name. Being Krishna's servant, she punishes these erring jivas and gives illusory happiness to the hypocrites who make a show of devotion to her. This same Maya Devi, however, manifests her true mercy when she sees a person worshiping the Lord's devotees. At that time, she helps the person attain Krishna. Maya Devi helps the person who sincerely accepts the holy name in order to cross the material ocean. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in a footnote, a very important point. He says the Chit Shakti, which is Krishna's internal potency, which helps those who chant the holy name of the Lord, right? The external potency doesn't allow those who are proud, attached, doesn't allow them to take shelter of the holy name. But the internal potency, the Chit Shakti is Krishna's internal potency, Maya is her shadow. Maya's purpose is to purify the jivas and gradually bring them to Krishna. She has two types of mercy. Real and deceptive. The word for real is called nishkapata. Nishkapata means non-duplicitous, like a person who worships the Lord. Nishkapata means that he's completely non-duplicitous. He's very sincere in his worship and his desire to please the Lord. So she has two types of mercy, real and deceptive. Deceptive is sakapata. When she gives real mercy, she gives Krishna bhakti through her function of knowledge. When she gives deceptive mercy, she gives them temporary material happiness. When she is very unmerciful, she throws the jiva into impersonal Brahman, which is the greatest misfortune for the jiva. So she has two types of potencies, nishkapata and sakapata, which is real, non-duplicitous, and sakapata means deceptive. Why? Because she gives them what they deserve. What do they deserve? Material knowledge, material wealth. As we said, these are all coming from the shadow Lakshmi, or the Chanchala Lakshmi. We spoke before about the Chanchala Lakshmi. The Chanchala Lakshmi, she gives flickering wealth. She gives flickering opulences. They don't stick, they don't stay. Because a person who's proud of his knowledge, a person who's proud of his wealth, a person who's proud of all of these achievements which comes from the shadow, ultimately they have to be lost. Maybe during one's lifetime, but as Prabhupada says, at the end of lifetime, surely they will be lost. This Prabhupada would oftentimes state that when the living entity, at the time of death, he takes nothing with him except his sinful reactions. Prabhupada says he's allowed to take those, but nothing else. Everything else stays behind. So whatever is given by the shadow potency is ultimately lost. So therefore she is described as, this is her two types of potencies. To purify the jivas, to gradually bring them to Krishna. Of course, as we know, one is through suffering, and the other is, of course, to reveal by her mercy, to bring one closer to Krishna, through the internal potency. Anyways, we were talking about what happened to Digvijay. Saraswati, appeared before him and blessed him, gave him the potency to conquer the three worlds. Yes, I'll be there in just a few minutes. Then, a very nice description of what happened. I'd like to read these verses. They're very simple reading, easy to understand. So, before I start reading, as we know, the Digvijay, when he spoke to Nimai Pandit with the intent of wanting to display his vast knowledge, then Nimai Pandit requested him, can you please begin reciting verses in glorification of the Ganges? Of course, because Saraswati manifested herself, because she gave him this benediction. She gave a benediction to, you can conquer the universe. But Unfortunately, she didn't give him the benediction that you can conquer the Lord. Because what happens is that when he began reciting all these verses in glorification of the Ganges, then the Lord said, "This is amazing. Can you please? Nobody but you can possibly explain the meanings of these verses. Can you please now explain the meanings of the verses that you just recited?" So then Kesava Kashmiri began explaining the meanings. And of course, then Nimai took one verse that he explained the meaning of, and he explained how there was a mistake both in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end of the words that he had used in that particular verse. What the mistakes were, I won't go into, but he clearly established them as mistakes to Kesava Kashmiri. And when Kesava Kashmiri realized that what had just happened to him in his mind is that nobody has ever found fault in anything that I've composed. It's not possible. And he became bewildered. Something that he also was not accustomed to, because somebody who has full knowledge, always dancing on his tongue, and Saraswatis always speak, there's no bewildered who always has empowered by Saraswati, Dushta Saraswati. So, never been bewildered before. So, then what happened is, now I'll begin reading from these verses. This is text 96 from this chapter. Digvijay, the great son of Saraswati, was unable to properly explain, for his intelligence had left him. Gone. Where did she go? She'll explain it later in a dream where she went. But gone. All he could do, is the common expression of a person who's, can't speak, is tongue-tied, can't say anything. Whatever little attempt he made to defend himself was refuted by Lord Gaurasundar. He tried, couldn't do it. It appeared that the Digvijay's intelligence had taken leave of him, for he didn't even know what he was saying. This is the delimiting potency of the Lord's Shakti, Dushta Saraswati, or Saraswati, or the Lord's internal potency, Parashakti. However you want to look at it, they're all one, and sometimes they act differently according to the need of the purpose. But they're all one. But this is the limiting potency. He didn't even know what he was saying. The Lord said, well, leave this verse and recite another. But the Digvijay was unable to recite like before. It is not unusual that Digvijay was bewildered in front of the Lord. It is not unusual that Digvijay was bewildered in front of the Lord, because even the Vedas are bewildered in the presence of the Lord. Lord Brahma, and this is wonderful, because we've discussed all these points. Lord Brahma, Lord Ananta, and Lord Shiva create, maintain, and annihilate innumerable universes. When even they are bewildered before the Lord, then what is surprising if this Brahman was bewildered? We spoke about Lord Brahma being bewildered in the presence of the Lord. We spoke about Lord Balaram being present, being bewildered during the Brahma Mohan Lila for a whole year. He was bewildered. And there's prayers in the Bhagavatam, which Ananta Shesh, he can't come to the end of glorifying the Lord, and he gets bewildered because he tries to get to the end and can never get to the end. He gets also bewildered. And Lord Shiva, of course, he gets bewildered by Mohini Murti in the presence of the Lord. He completely lost his discrimination and intelligence in the presence of Mohini. So if this happens to Brahma, Ananta, Lord Shiva, then it's not surprising if this Brahmin was bewildered. And then in the next verse, unlimited universes are bewildered by Maya, the shadow of Lakshmi, Saraswati, and other internal potencies. The shadow. All right? Maya is the shadow. Unlimited universes are bewildered by Maya, the shadow of Lakshmi, Saraswati, and other internal potencies of the Lord. Yet she is also bewildered in the presence of the Lord, and therefore she always stands behind him. There's a verse in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, which specifically states, I think it's spoken by Lord Brahma, she says that whenever, and this is what Prabhupada always uses the example of that the king's ministers always stand behind the king. He said whenever Krishna is present, the ministers always have to go behind. They never go in front. You'll never see the ministers, guards, nothing. They're always standing behind. And the verse of the second canto of Bhagavatam is Vilajamanaya Yasya. It's described how Maya, she bewilders everyone, and whenever Krishna is present, she always has to stand behind. Prabhupada quotes that verse, and he also quotes Krishna Surya Sam Maya Haya Andhakara Yahan Krishna Tahamaya Mayara Arikara. That whenever Krishna is there, Maya can't be present. Can't be present when Krishna is there. So Maya, she's bewildered in the presence of the Lord, and therefore she always stands behind him. When the compiler of the Vedas and even Ananta Shesha are bewildered in the presence of the Lord, then what is surprising if the Digvijay is bewildered? It is impossible for ordinary living entities to understand the activities of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his activities are transcendently glorious. In fact, the activities performed by the Supreme Lord are all meant for the deliverance of the conditioned souls. As the Digvijayi faced defeat, the Lord's students were on the verge of laughing. The Lord, however, forbade them from laughing and sweetly spoke to the Brahmin. Why? The Lord said previously, if he's defeated, he'll definitely die. And he had a higher plan. So he said, you please go home for today, and tomorrow we'll discuss some more. You must be tired after your long recitation, and it's getting late. Please go take rest. We know Digvijay left. He went home, began chanting his mantras to Saraswati, began asking himself, how did it happen? How did it happen? How did it happen? Please. He was chanting his mantra to Saraswati. How did it happen? And while he was asking himself, he fell asleep. And when he fell asleep, then Saraswati appeared to him in his dream and said, explained basically that it was not possible for you to speak in the presence of the Lord because I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed in the presence of the Lord. How could you speak? This is exactly the word she used. So I can't allow you to show off, and you don't understand who this person was. He is the Supreme Lord himself. Nobody else could possibly have defeated you. And then she revealed to him, you must understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I can never manifest in front, in his presence. And therefore, as much as you tried to speak, I wasn't there because I didn't agree to stay there. I left. And therefore you were bewildered because of that. Because you were so bewildered. In other words, she delimited his knowledge. He had sufficient knowledge to defeat the universes, but he didn't have sufficient knowledge and never could have sufficient knowledge to defeat the Lord. Because the Lord can never be defeated and is only defeated by devotion. So therefore, Goddess Saraswati told him in his dream, you should go back tomorrow. You should surrender to him. You should prostrate yourself to him and accept him fully as a worshipable Lord. Give up your pride of all of this knowledge. And then she left. And then the following morning, Kesava Kashmiri woke up and he immediately went before Nimai and immediately dandabats. And Nimai said, what's this? What brought this on? Why the dandavats? Why are you prostrating yourself in this way? And of course, Digvijay then explained that now I know who you are. I did not know, but now I know who you are, and therefore I completely surrender myself to you. I know that without taking shelter of you, there's no value to whatever knowledge I have. And now being completely surrendered to you, I beg you, please, and simply engage me in your service. And there's some very nice verses. There's very short, and I'm going to end because I've spoken long enough. I thought it was not going to be. Anyways, where is it? Uh-oh. He says, conquering the world is not the proper use for knowledge. This is Lord Chaitanya speaking to Digvijay. The proper use of knowledge is to worship the Supreme Lord. Try to understand. When one gives up his body, he cannot take his wealth and reputation with him. And there's a few other verses that were also spoken. But take me just 1 minute, and I will find them. Yes. That is why devotees renounce material endeavors and serve the Supreme Lord with firm determination. Therefore, O Brahman, give up all materialistic association and immediately begin to worship the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Up to the time of your death, serve Krishna with confidence. Know without doubt that the goal of knowledge is to fix one's mind on Krishna's lotus feet. The best advice I can give you is that devotional service to the Supreme Lord Vishnu is the only substantial truth throughout all the worlds. After saying this, the Lord embraced the Brahmin in satisfaction, Being embraced by the Lord of Vaikuntha, the Brahmin was freed from all material bondage. Then the Lord said, O Brahmin, give up your pride, worship Krishna, and be merciful to all living entities. What Saraswati told you in confidence should not be told to anyone. Why did he say that? Because he had not revealed yet. Just like the same thing with the Brahmin also who 3 times he made the offering. And when when the Nimai came before the Brahmin and took his offering for the 3rd time and revealed to him, he said, don't say anything to anyone. I've not yet manifest my purpose yet. Don't. He said, if you say, and you'll be in trouble. He's saying the same thing to Digvijay. He said, don't say anything to anyone yet. Because he was still gathering all those students until the time when he was ready to, after returning from Gaya, first he had to go to Gaya. He had to be take it with his spiritual master, Ishwar Puri, and become his disciple, and then come back and then manifest his devotional qualities and tell all the students, okay, come to class, and then they would come to class and he would only speak about Krishna, and they would go and complain to the headmaster of the school, something's wrong with Nimai Pandit. He's only talking about Krishna. Anything he says when he's explaining grammar, the only words he uses is about Krishna, and please help us to understand what's going on with Nimai. And anyways, such is the nature of Lord Chaitanya's wonderful pastimes. I've spoken long than I expected. I will not chant japa this evening, but this is a little bit about how this potency of the Lord, who is not different from the Lord, is of the same substance as the Lord, and also different, how she acts and delimits the knowledge of those who are proud of their knowledge, who are accustomed to mental speculation, who are accustomed to try to understand the truth by any means other than surrendering to the Lord. Then she acts to delimit their knowledge. She sets the limits, and therefore no one can know Krishna by the limits she sets without surrendering to Krishna. Daivi Shagunamayi Mama Maya Duratiya. As Krishna says, if you surrendered to me, then Maya, this Maya Shakti, I will tell her, okay, leave him alone. Easily cross beyond it when Krishna says to Maya Shakti, because Maya works according to Krishna's direction. When Krishna says, it's okay, he's under the protection of internal potency now. Your internal potency. And becomes very easy. And then one can know Krishna. So we'll stop. And I'm not going to chant japa this evening. Forgive me. It's 7:21 here. And we will continue with the next verse on Monday. And tomorrow, I believe, we're supposed to read from Chaitanya Charitamrita to the Russian-speaking devotees at 10 o'clock a.m. I'm going to be there. But I've discovered that there is a direct correlation between talking too much and what goes on in my throat. So I'm still convinced eventually it will go away, but at least for now, let's see what happens between today and tomorrow morning. But I'm planning to give class tomorrow morning. And I didn't give class on Wednesday because some devotees were asking why I didn't give class on Wednesday. I asked Manu Mohan to give class because I was thinking maybe if I get an extra day to rest my voice and take 3 straight days, then maybe it will help. It did. I talked less, but I didn't stop talking. So let's see what happens tomorrow morning. And but I will be here at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Siddhi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki.